Hey, what's up? This is part of the series where I read the different post-its that I found on the Union Square subway station a few days after Donald J. Trump won his first term as president. And the way I approach these is by people literally mean things figuratively. Just like I did not literally mean that people are going to get in a physical train and go to an actual location called MAGA land when I put my post-it up there, I don't think people literally mean exactly what they wrote. So I try to think about what's the figurative things that are behind what they wrote and their actual intended meaning. So getting into that. This is a bonus reading to the previous one I just recorded that I had a long preamble talking about the media's coverage of Donald Trump's daily briefings about this pandemic that's going on at the time of recording this. So I'm not going to give a lot of preamble into talking about current affairs. If you want to check that out, there'll be a link to that one as well. Or if you want to check, it's the one that's number 14 in this series. So getting right into it. The first post-it is, at LGBT You Are Loved. So for this one, I'll do it a little different than I normally do. I normally just kind of read these and I just give you my thoughts off the top of my head. But with this one, I'm thinking, hey, I actually have time. I'm actually doing a recording of these, so I can actually go down and research and back up what I'm saying in here. To begin with on the literal thing, LGBT You Are Loved. That's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgenders. Now within those groups themselves, there's a whole like trans exclusionary feminists and things like that. So there is actual infighting in that situation. But I'm not going to get into that. I'm focusing on just the literal thing, you are loved. I would not want to be loved solely because of a feature that I have no control over. Even if it's just a simple thing that I chose between one or other options, I don't think that in and of itself should be enough. And in this situation, if people are claiming that this is something that's just by choice, just like, okay, I am born due to my parents being two individuals of the Luya tribe, which is of the Bantu peoples of the Negroid human Homo sapiens species, then I happen to also be that. I would not want somebody to base their feelings on who I am, on how to treat me, based on that alone. I guess maybe my parents, just part of them. But when it comes down to this, I don't want to be hated for that, because there are some people who just see that and hate me for that. But on the flip side, I don't want to be loved for just that anyway. I had no choice in that. And when it comes down to homosexuality, to being a lesbian, to being gay, to being bisexual, to even in this case being transgender, people say this isn't a choice thing. There might be a small amount of nurture into it, but it's mostly based off of nature. So why would you want to be loved solely for that? So what's the figurative thing? Because I think that's what's more important. There were some people talking about how Trump is anti-gay. Now, this is a very small number of people because most people just ask him, okay, what did he actually say? And he actually hasn't said anything. On the contrary, he was the first Republican candidate to actually mention LGBT during his speech at the Republican National Convention, which is put up as a big deal because of the general expectation or perception of the Republicans' stance on lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender issues, which was added kind of more recently. So I decided to go online and check and see what are the actual things that Trump has done, that people are saying, okay, these are the fears. So not the whole camps and thing, because those are just people who are just being completely off their gourds, talking about, oh, there's going to be re-education camps, Electric Pence is going to be in charge of that. No, I'm not going to take those people seriously. But what did the actual people expect to happen? What were they saying, oh, the Republican Party might do this? Because Trump has empowered these other people, this is what they're going to do. So you can go online and check it out. This is projectspropublica.org, and this is under Trump, LGBTQ progress is being reversed in plain sight. So they focus on employment, and they say, I'm just going to read the headings or the head quotes that are pulled out for this, and then you can go down and check it out for yourself. So the first one is employment. After consultation with my generals and military experts, please be advised that the United States government will not accept or allow transgender individuals to serve in any capacity in the military. So they're leading off with this point, and this one thing I've thought of. The West, United States of America, has done so well that it can have a military where people are looking at it as employment because they realize that 99% of those jobs in the military, you're not actually going to be put on the front line and have any risk of actually dying. So people want to jump in these kind of jobs. But my take on this is when it comes to something like an actual unit, an actual military unit, you build a kind of camaraderie and relationships between each other. You rely on each other in a certain way. And when it comes to somebody being transgender, first of all, when you're actually transitioning in that process, there's a lot of hormones, a lot of things that are going through. Most people will even admit, even pro-transgender people, some of the activists will admit that it's mentally challenging. Then you add the military and all those things on it, and people could change around. So those could be certain risks and things in there. I don't necessarily consider this to be anti-transgender. Let me know what you guys think. They give 8 other examples of things that deal with employment, but let's go to the next one, schools and youth. President Trump revoked the Education Department's order that public schools allow gender-confused males access to girls' restrooms and locker rooms. This is Trump 2020 campaign website of promises kept under achievements. So with this one, look, these are gender-confused people. What percentage of the population are we talking about here? So for that small percent of the population, we have to do this that's going to adjust and affect the lives of 99.9999% of the females who go to that school who don't want somebody who may appear like a male or who may still have a penis be in their locker room, or vice versa. I'm not seeing the negative with this. And they're talking about gender-confused males access to girls' restrooms. I wonder, do gender-confused girls have access to male locker rooms in this kind of situation? Now, this comes to the whole thing where there's a double standard between how males and females are treated in society, despite this whole idea of us, society is a patriarchy that's anti-female. That's quite wrong. We're a gynocentric species. Another anecdotal thing to that, check the transgender actually figures. You'll see that the majority of it is males transitioning to females rather than females transitioning to males. Next one, healthcare. We're going back to the plain meaning of those terms, which is based on biological sex. And this is Roger Servino, the director of the Office of Civil Rights and Department of Health and Human Services. This is a qualification thing that I have no real big problem with. There is a difference between male, man, masculine, and female, woman, feminine. Male and female to me are just biological. That's XXXY. Those are things that you really can't change. So far right now, I mean, we are getting to the point where you're going to be able to actually do gene therapy and things like that, where you can actually slowly change your actual DNA and things like that. That's a future sci-fi type thing right now, but it's possible. We're not there yet. Now, men and women, that's what societies define to be the expected behavior of males or females in that current society, in that current culture, of adult age, a certain behavior. Now, when you look at the younger versions, it's boys and girls. Now, those behaviors are behavioral patterns that are expected, that this is what we expect men to do. This is what we expect girls to be like. Those things are defined by the traits, and those traits themselves are masculine and feminine. Those are things that are put on the accessories and other things associated with men and women, which is a description of males and females in different cultures. So those are 3 different categories. For example, the reaction of a male crying in any culture, at least in the Western culture, isn't the same as a female crying. Now that has changed, but it was considered to be a very feminine trait to cry at things. It wasn't expected that a man would cry at things. Now a boy would be allowed to cry to a certain point, but then that boy would get to a point where you'd be told, man up. Now that you've crossed this boyhood into the threshold of manhood, you weren't allowed to cry over certain things. Now that has changed. We now have a culture where men and women in general can cry over things without it necessarily being considered feminine. But for example, if you're speeding and a policeman pulls you over and is going to give you a ticket and you're male and you cry, it's not going to have the same reaction as if a woman does or if a female does it. So anyway, those are things just talking about the situation. So this thing of going back to the biological sex for the reason of lawmaking, whether it's defining male, female, I think in this situation, defining man, woman, boy, girl, to actually have a genetic biological aspect to it, I think that's okay for the actual definitions, just for the way it's used in public. I think when most people speak, in general, they don't go to those 3 different definitions that I was talking about, those 3 different classifications. Man and male, woman and female are a lot more tied in. And I think it's a situation where the minority that may think in those 3 different groups that I think of, it's up to us to convince the rest of society to actually change and say, look, this is what we're saying, and then these things will slowly change. On to the next one, public housing. Everybody is equal. Everybody has equal rights, but nobody gets extra rights. And when we start trying to impose the extra rights based on a few people who perhaps are abnormal, where does that lead? Again, this one is focusing on transgender people. For the LGBT, it seems to be rather heavily focused on T, which is, again, and especially for this one, as we're talking about abnormal, the definition of abnormal is something that is not normal, the exception to normal. If we all of a sudden woke up tomorrow and then 99% of the world had a third arm and was purple skinned, then I would be abnormal. Being born into the body of the sex that you feel is not yours is an abnormal thing, which is defined as in comparison to the way the normal situation is that happens to every life form that has sexes. So let's throw away that potential, how dare you call us abnormal? Because I think even transgender people will agree that they are abnormal, and they will ask that we need special attention. That's why someone has an LGBT thing or LGBTQ adding that. They're saying we are special. We need special attention because we're not being treated like everybody else. I have a disagreement with the whole everybody's equal thing. I don't think everybody's equal, and I think it's great that everybody isn't equal because I could suck at something, but then somebody else is not going to suck at that thing, and then they'll be able to be good at that thing, and then they'll do that thing, and then I can benefit from that thing, and then they can benefit from the thing that I'm good at that they might suck at. So this is just a cool thing. If everything that was good for the goose is good for the gander, we'd all be geese. But we're not, and diversity actually can be a strength, and I think it is in this sense that we're not all equal. Imagine in this time of this pandemic, if we were all equally weak to getting this virus and dying, we'd be done. We'd all be done. It's a good thing that we have a different variety when it comes to this and many other things. So this is in specific about an Obama-era protection that was giving transgender people equal access to homeless shelters. Now when it comes down to this, talking about equal access, go to your country and just check and see how many homeless shelters are they that are specifically for women, and see how many homeless shelters that are specifically for men. Then next, go in and check the actual figures of the percent of males versus females that are homeless in your country. But I guess this site may be specifically focusing on LGBT instead of the vast majority of males that are underserved by this actual service. Next is foster care and adoption. Child welfare providers will never be forced to choose between their faith and serving those in need, not on our watch. This is Mike Pence in a speech at HHS's 2019 National Adoption Month celebration. This is Vice President Mike Pence. Now this specifically focuses on people, adoption agencies, being able to choose who they let adopt the kid. This is not, a parent can choose, this kid says they're gay, I don't want to adopt this kid, give me a straight one. I think that might be a thing that's done, but in that case, I don't think anyone really has an issue or problem with that. I don't know what the figures are, but when it comes to this, they're saying, we don't want same-sex couples. A Christian orphanage, for example, may feel, I don't want to give this kid to the same-sex couple. With this, I apply the non-aggression principle. I don't think anyone is being aggressed against here if an adoption agency has taken the chance and taken the choice to actually house a kid and provide for them, and then they say, we decide we'd not want to give to this kind of parent who's in this kind of situation. There are other things people consider. People consider how much money does these people make. If some parents are terminally ill, do they actually just say, we can just give it to this couple? If this couple has a history and different things, there's different decisions in what to make it. If they're basing it on religions that I don't agree with, it's not up to me to decide that, so I don't necessarily see a negative reason for this. I would prefer if the state left this and left it up to the private market, the open market, where somebody else would come up with an orphanage and say, we are exactly like that orphanage, but we won't discriminate against you for what I personally consider to be an illogical reason and based on some bias and things like that. But people do this for many reasons and for many things. But I think state involvement is part of why there's so many kids who actually need adoption and the system is messed up, but that's for another video and for another time. The next one is criminal justice. The designation to a facility of the inmate's identified gender would be appropriate only in rare cases. And this is the revised Federal Bureau of Prisons Transgender Offender Manual of 2018. This is the establishment of new guidelines that direct that for the initial booking, the initial housing of any offender, any inmate, it should be to the biological sex. So if a male comes in that identifies as a female or is transitioning to female, you don't put them in the female's jail. You actually put them in the male cell, in the male jail first, and then they can be an appeals process for the person to actually go to a different one if it's found that, this person actually has been deemed to be female and should be in the women's jail. With this situation, would people be pro just one gender jail, just not having any kind of breakup with this situation. Everybody just goes into the same prison. They should have prisons depending on the crime. If you're found guilty for murder, you go to the murderer's jail. No matter what, male, female, transgender, whatever you want to be, you go to the murderer's one. If you go to shoplifting, you all go to the shoplifting one. You're just left in this huge rooms. Is that what people would prefer? I don't know. Now, with this one, they're specifically talking about protecting females from being raped and assaulted by males who identify as female. They're not doing the opposite end of it, because there's very few females that identify as male that commit crimes and then go to jail. Now, if you want to say that, no, this is focusing on the males that identify as female that are put in the male jails and then are sexually assaulted, that's just part of the horrific actual rape culture that exists in the West. It's the only place in actual rape culture in the West of males getting raped in jail. Now, the last one is public life. There is no need for the power of the government to be arrayed against an individual who is honestly attempting to live out, to freely exercise his sincere religious beliefs, and there are plenty of other people to bake that cake. This is by Jeff Sessions, a former Attorney General. Now, this one, I have a separate video talking about this, and as I've mentioned before, I am for the non-aggression principle. I am for freedom of association. I don't think anybody should be forced to do anything for anybody else. My body, my choice. I am somewhat of an absolutist on this one. If I was sitting there on the side of the road choking, I don't think I had the right for anyone else to stop or to give me the Heimlich maneuver or to try and save me. I don't have the right to demand a doctor put in 24-hour days so he can make sure that I am healed. If his shift has ended, if he's just put in a 10-hour day, and then I come in the 11th hour and he's at home, I don't have the right to demand that doctor come back. I think this would have been a little different if it was a Muslim baker. So take religion out of this. I am a graphic designer. I do web design. I do visual arts and things like this. If somebody says, hey, I'm commissioning this piece from you, this sculpture, this art piece, I want you to do an animation for me, praising God, talking about how marvelous Jesus is and how he is the way to save you from XYZ situation. And I say, no, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to do it. Would you want them to force me to do that? Even if it's a decision based on my lack of belief, my lack in believing that what they're saying, what they're asking me to do is something I feel comfortable doing. I don't think you'd think that. Now, if I remember correctly, this baker actually had cakes already made in his store, and he said, you can pick up one of those cakes and take them, but I am not decorating your cake for this gay wedding that you wanted, because that's him having a more direct action in this thing that he disagreed with. So for example, that would be like me having a template animation where somebody can just switch out the words and things like that, or the text, can just write a text document and plug it into that animation, and that animation will say whatever they want. And then I say, look, you can take that, but I'm not going to personalize a Jesus is the Savior animation for you. But you can take this template and use that. And then those people still sue me? With this one, I was like, no, these guys were doing it a bit too much. I think you doth protest too much. LGBT, from this website, I think you doth protest too much. And I think post-pandemic, people are going to reevaluate what they were spending time on, what was actually a serious situation versus what isn't. People are going to be like, okay, we were spending a lot of time focusing on certain things that may not have been as big of an issue as they are. Or we have better ways to deal with these actual issues versus the means we're actually doing it. And I hope that helps the people who actually are in need in the LGBTQ community, because there are some people who actually are in need. But some of these things being brought up, I just don't buy it. And for damn sure, even when there actually are issues, I don't think the state, or specifically more state involvement, is a solution to any of these issues. You look back at the civil rights movement, who was setting those segregation laws? It was the state. Look back to slavery, who was actually catching the escaped slaves? It was the state security forces. It wasn't just private individuals. We need to just step away from the state and get back to more individuality, to get back to more individual liberty, to get back to more individual agency. And then we'll find this whole situation improving for everyone. So let me know what you guys think about this way of doing this series. I normally just have off the top of my head. This one I went more with actual research and detail and reading actual things to address the thing. Not every post-it actually lends itself to this, but some might, and I might do this again. But let me know what you guys thought about this. Let me know, do you think Trump has actually made the situation worse for LGBT people, or do you think it's been better? Do you think it's been a wash? Let me know what you think. Like, share, and subscribe. Links below to the merchandise store. You can buy some stuff there. There's some LGBT stuff on there as well. Interested to see how many of the people get the stuff that I'm talking about. And there's also links to PayPal if you'd want a one-time donation, if you can handle that at this time and you'd like to support me making this content. Till next time, goodbye, stay safe, stay clean, wash your hands.